The gallery hummed with quiet expectation. High above the shooting lanes, Commander Rizal of the Threxian Dominion stood motionless in the observation deck, 3 arms folded behind his back, 4th hand stroking a tendril of his lower jaw. He was flanked by Dominion tacticians, data scribes, and one trembling junior officer who hadn't yet learned to keep quiet during public displays of mediocrity. Below them, the humans stood alone on Pad 8. Lieutenant Ken Drake. Species, Homo sapiens. Designation, Provisional Military Observer. Weapon, obsolete. Rizal's secondary eyes tracked the wood and steel weapon in the human's hands. A kinetic rifle. Not coil-fed. Not plasma. Not even magnetically assisted. Does he intend to hunt livestock? Rizal mused aloud, eliciting snorts from his aides. The announcer's voice crackled through the chamber. Next participant, human representative. Lieutenant Kenneth Drake of Earth. The crowd, a dozen species strong, offered a courteous pause. No cheering. Just murmured curiosity and digital note-taking. The targets flickered into place downrange, 10 spheres hovering at calculated angles, coded to shift in speed and arc based on the competitor's rank. For elite participants, the spheres shimmered unpredictably, laced with magnetic interference. Ken rolled his neck and stepped forward like he'd wandered into the wrong classroom. His posture was relaxed. Too relaxed. He didn't sync his neuroband. Didn't enable targeting assist. He didn't even calibrate for atmospheric variance. Instead, he raised the rifle casually and fired. Crack. The sound echoed sharply, analog and raw. One of the spheres blinked blue, but remained untouched. The round had veered a full meter off. The gallery chuckled. He missed by the length of a fusion conduit, whispered a selenite marksman. Ken didn't seem to notice. He adjusted the rifle, turned his foot slightly, and fired again. Another miss. This time, the bullet pinged off a wall strut far behind the targets. The Threxian tactician to Rizal's right leaned in. Should we be concerned about collateral damage? No, Rizal said coolly. He isn't dangerous. Just misplaced. Ken kept shooting, 10 shots total. Not one direct hit. The scoreboard updated with a flat 0. Rizal tapped his interface. Forward this footage to our psychology division. Their analysis may explain this irrational display. On the floor, Ken stepped back, slung the rifle over his shoulder, and nodded to the judges like a man returning library books. One of the Gralian spectators whistled. Was that supposed to be art? The human walked off the platform. The next competitor, a Razaki Precision Elite, stepped forward, calibrated his plasma arc rifle, and vaporized all 10 targets within 6 seconds. Applause erupted. Behind the flare of fireworks and stats, Ken was already forgotten by most. But Rizal kept watching him as he passed beneath the deck. The human stopped at a vending unit, bought a fizzy drink, and leaned casually against the column. Watching. Waiting. Primitive creature, Rizal muttered. They don't even know how to aim. 20 minutes later, a red light blinked on the wall above Pad 8. Malfunction? Asked the technician. Sensor alignment fault, a machine replied. Trajectory interference detected. Rizal's brow rose. He tapped his neural console and replayed Ken's first shot. Trajectory overlay showed the round missed, but on closer review, it glanced something unseen, ricocheted upward, and embedded itself into a vent duct. Not random. Angled. He dismissed the thought. One lucky bounce did not rewrite centuries of Threxian doctrine. 2 hours into the tournament, Ken sat alone in the observation lounge, sketching crude shapes on his tablet. His eyes flicked up occasionally to the scoreboard, which still showed a 0. Another human, a diplomat this time, walked over and leaned on the rail beside him. You embarrassed us, you know. Ken didn't look up. Did I? You know how they see us. New species. Primitives. That stunt didn't help. Ken tilted the tablet toward him. I wasn't aiming for the target. What were you aiming for then? Ken smiled. Let's see if they figure it out. Back in the tech pit, a Razaki engineer pulled a scorch targeting drone from the diagnostics array. He turned it in his hands, noting a thin crack along the stabilization ring. "Odd," he said. "We test these to withstand direct plasma hits. This one fell apart after a single miss." From behind, a technician said, "That wasn't a plasma hit." "What was it?" "A kinetic bounce." The Razaki blinked. "Who still uses kinetic rounds?" They both looked up, toward the replay screen, just as it showed Ken's eighth shot glancing off a barrier post and careening upward, disappearing into the sensor grid behind the targets. The engineer's fingers froze. "Are we sure he missed?" In the command chamber, Rizal reviewed the telemetry again. None of the shots had struck their intended targets. That was undeniable. But each had intersected something: relay boxes, vent shields, harmonic emitters, stress nodes in the domed scaffolding. Unintentional? Possibly. Uninteresting? Certainly not. He opened a secure channel. "Requesting physics trace on all kinetic strikes from human Pad 8, he said. A pause. "Commander," came the reply. "Why waste resources on a zero-score anomaly?" Rizal's voice was flat. "Because the zero may be deliberate." The first failure was dismissed. Sector 3's targeting node dropped offline for 8 seconds. Nothing critical. The official report labeled it an atmospheric variance. That was the phrase everyone used when no one knew what actually happened. The second failure was harder to ignore. During the Narnis competitor's run, a projectile drone spun out of its targeting pattern and crashed mid-arc. The diagnostics logged a cascade in the drone's internal gyros, a cascade triggered by a fractional tremor in the gallery's floor plate. The Threxian engineer overseeing the event frowned. "Recalibrate?" "No," the AI responded. "The error began elsewhere." He traced the tremor back through microsecond log telemetry. A kinetic disturbance. Origin Pad 8. The engineer blinked. "That was the human's lane." Commander Rizal stood again above the lanes, arms behind his back. He hadn't moved since his last review. But something gnawed at him now, slow and deliberate. Below, the event continued. Glorious precision. Plasma bolts danced. Targets exploded in beautiful symmetry. But Rizal wasn't watching them. He was rewatching something else, the human's fifth shot. Trajectory path. 43.7 degrees low, then a ricochet into the western support brace, then a glancing touch on a coolant pipe flange, millimeters off, followed by a final deflection into the base of the relay column. The relay that had suffered a ghost signal 15 minutes later. Not statistically significant. Not yet. But increasingly inconvenient. He turned to his aide. "Where is the human now?" "Observation deck, east quadrant." "Alone?" Rizal nodded. "Leave him undisturbed. And pull all security feeds from Pad 8. Cross-reference with the failures." The aide hesitated. "Sir, if this is sabotage..." "It's not sabotage." Rizal's voice was cold. "Saboteurs hide. This one stares openly at the machine he's dismantling." Ken sat in the observation lounge, legs crossed, tablet in his lap. His posture was unchanged, casual, but his eyes tracked everything. He tapped once on the tablet. A geometric model rotated. Angles, arcs, force vectors. It looked like a child's doodle at first. Then a fragment of architecture. Then a map of weak points. He wasn't calculating damage. He was calculating consequence. Behind him, a Gralian technician entered quietly, pretending to check the console. Ken didn't turn. "You're not from maintenance," he said. The Gralian froze. "I'm monitoring feedback loops." Ken smiled faintly. "Of course." He closed the tablet. "Be careful around the vent behind Pad 3. Might be unstable." The technician frowned. "How would you?" Ken stood. "You'll see soon enough." In the arena, the next competitor was a Threxian prodigy. 12 medals, 3 neural augmentations, genetically bred for equilibrium and precision. She raised her hyperbrow with mathematical calm. The targets lifted, flickered, and began their arc. She released. The bolt curved in midair, beautiful, impossible, then wavered, veered left, and shattered against the wall. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The prodigy looked stunned. Her system recalibrated and fired again. Another miss. All around the arena, murmurs began. The judge console beeped. Trajectory anomaly detected. Magnetic interference increasing. Back in Central Alps, the diagnostics team stared at their displays in disbelief. Everything's connected, the lead engineer said. Every system fault, every relay failure, maps back to that human's bullet impacts. The words hung in the air. Another tech muttered. But they missed the targets. They weren't aiming at the targets. A stillness settled over the room. Rizal entered without a word and moved to the center console. He gestured to a tech. Pull the heat map overlay. She complied. The screen lit up in crimson and blue, marking pressure shifts, resonance patterns, and signal decay. The highest interference levels ran in a curved diagonal path. Where's the origin? Pad 8, she whispered. Ken walked slowly through the hall beneath the gallery. He ran a hand along the wall, then tapped a hollow panel twice. The vibration echoed faintly. He smiled. Ahead of him, a pair of Dominion guards turned the corner. They stopped. You're not authorized to be here, one said sharply. Ken tilted his head. Neither was the architect who designed this gallery. The second guard reached for his baton. Return to the spectator level. Ken raised his hands. Sure. Just making sure no one leans too hard on this corridor. The resonance frequency's at a threshold now. One wrong impact and... He trailed off. The guards stared at him. You're bluffing. Ken smiled again. That's the best part. I don't have to. Back above, Rizal issued a priority order. Lockdown Pad 8. Investigate every impact site. Isolate the human weapon. The command spread instantly. Within minutes, Dominion technicians surrounded the lane. The rifle was scanned, logged, and lifted into containment. Initial readings showed no unusual properties. Just iron, powder, brass. Primitive. Yet each miss had connected with something. Bolts. Sensor braces. Load-bearing welds. One technician stepped back from a panel and swallowed hard. Sir, he was creating harmonic reverberations. Another added. Some of these connections, they're mathematically impossible unless pre-mapped. A third stared at the cracked support node. He wasn't shooting at the gallery, she whispered. He was programming it. On the far side of the complex, a systems analyst slammed her hand on her desk. I found it, she shouted. Frame 4782. Look. The room darkened. A slow-motion playback began. Ken's fourth shot ricocheted off a steel beam, then pinged off the corner of a floating maintenance drone. That drone, 2 hours later, had clipped the coolant line near Pad 6, setting off a localized short. The analyst pointed. He used the drone. Used it. Like a moving part in a puzzle. Rizal watched in silence. No neural link. No advanced optics. No AI. Just angles. And patience. And intention. He turned away from the screen and walked to the window. Across the arena, Ken was watching him. Not gloating. Not smiling. Just observing. The commander's throat tightened. Prepare a full vector audit, he said quietly. Of what? An aide asked. Rizal didn't blink. Of everything. The alarm was silent. No flashing lights. No blaring klaxons. Just the kind of deep systemic hush that only engineers hear, the quiet tension of a machine holding its breath. Commander Rizal stood at the center of the Dominion's war room as holograms bloomed around him. Vectors. Overlays. Impact analyses. Each one led back to a single name. Lieutenant Kenneth Drake. The human had fired 10 shots. 10. Yet 42 anomalies had since rippled across the precision dome. Thermal shifts, signal distortion, magnetic field anomalies. Not random. Timed. Placed. Choreographed. Update, Rizal said. His top analyst responded without turning. We've confirmed he destabilized the gallery's harmonics. Not enough to collapse it, just enough to disrupt every advanced weapon's trajectory from the inside. So no competitor could maintain lock, Rizal said. Correct. A pause. He made us miss. Across the Colosseum, in the echoing chamber now cleared of spectators, Ken Drake stood alone at the center of Pad 8. His weapon had been removed hours ago, but he didn't need it anymore. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the walls, the ceilings, the pathways he'd drawn in echoes and metal. Invisible lines that others were just beginning to notice. Footsteps echoed behind him. It was Rizal. No guards. No entourage. Just the commander and the human, face to face under the high steel arches. You gamed the system, Rizal said without preamble. Ken gave a non-committal shrug. I studied it. You understand that your participation was meant to assess precision. I was precise. You didn't hit a single target. I wasn't aiming at the targets. Rizal's nostrils flared. Then what, human, were you aiming for? Ken turned back to the far wall. The illusion. A long silence passed. Rizal's voice lowered. Explain. Ken spoke softly, as if narrating the obvious. You've engineered your competitions to reward linear success, speed, aim, calibration. But the system around it? Fragile. Over-engineered. Predictable. He pointed to the far corner of the chamber. Your power relays vibrate when struck at 43 degrees. Your targeting drones recalibrate after gyro interference, not before. Your AI rebalances harmonics across sectors instead of isolating. He looked at the commander. So I tested the stress points. Not the scoreboard. Rizal felt it, the cold realization slipping under his armor. This was a performance, he said quietly. Ken nodded. You were watching the wrong show. The official scoreboard had glitched 12 minutes earlier. Every participant's stats now flickered, as if corrupted. None of the precision runs were displaying. Dominion tech scrambled to fix it, unaware that the error had originated not from code, but from the resonance pulse Ken had built into his sixth shot. His sixth shot had never touched a target. It had traveled through 3 deflections to the root subframe, where it struck a frequency plate timed to the maintenance loop. The shockwave desynced every scoring node for exactly 0.2 seconds. Enough to break the system's authority. Who taught you this? Rizal asked. Ken shook his head. No one. We just look at things differently. Back in Dominion Ops, a silence spread. Each monitor now displayed a frozen scoreboard. At the bottom, blinking faintly, was the only name still displaying a value. Kenneth Drake, score null. A Threxian advisor whispered. What does null mean? The analyst exhaled. It means the system couldn't compute a result. In the observation lounge, the Gralian diplomat leaned toward his Rizaki counterpart. Are they promoting him? The Rizaki didn't answer. Just stared at the screen. In their cultures, failure was punished. Success was rewarded. But what was undefinable? That was feared. Rizal stepped closer to Ken. You were never competing. I was never allowed to win, Ken said. So I made winning irrelevant. The commander studied him. You wanted to humiliate us? No, Ken said, shaking his head. You already did that yourselves. I just showed the flaw. Then why do it at all? Ken looked him in the eye. To make you pay attention. A distant rumble echoed through the lower decks. Nothing dangerous, just a residual shift as the harmonic pulse diffused. But it left a mark. The gallery's echo chamber, its pristine acoustics, its architectural pride, would need months to recalibrate. An elegant system, once pristine, now off balance. Just like the Concorde. In the final briefing before the diplomatic assembly, a dozen species envoys debated Earth's place in the military council. They're unstable, one hissed. They're unpredictable, said another. They're dangerous, added a third. But the Threxian, when called to speak, said only this. They see the system. Not just the surface. Not the symbols we place for ceremony. Not the trophies we assign to competence. He turned to the others. They look at the structure underneath it all, and then they choose which part to touch. Ken walked down the empty corridor, past flickering lights, past dormant drones. The sane Gralian technician from before approached him quietly. Why kinetic? He asked. Why not use our tools? Ken stopped. You build weapons that obey rules, he said. We use tools that question them. The technician paused. That's dangerous. Ken nodded. Exactly. In his personal report, Rizal wrote only one line. Humanity does not aim to impress. They aim to disrupt. He closed the file, encrypted it, and left a final annotation. Promote Earth to Strategic Category Alpha. Monitor without provocation. Do not assume weakness again. The next day, the gallery was cordoned off for structural maintenance. Pad 8 was sealed permanently. But the dent in the vent duct, from Shot 4, remained untouched. As if left there, intentionally. A marker. A signature. Not of conquest. Of understanding.